All right, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us for this year's senior thesis presentations in critical and visual studies. We have 6 presentations today, and after each one there will be a brief moment for comments or questions. Our first presenter is Garrison Cunningham. His project, Phenomenal Feedback, explores how embodied perception, affect, and social structures interact to shape both our experience of the world and the limits of control.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Trying to break the ice as the first presenter. Happy to see everyone, of course. My presentation is going to be called Phenomenal Feedback. Obviously, the goal is that you should understand what I mean by phenomenal feedback by the end of the presentation. So, over my 2.5 years at Pratt, I've been lended quite a few lenses for looking at the world through philosophers, theorists, artists, directors, physicists that offer different renderings, but usually looking at the same thing, which is the world, or different perspectives, which allow me to see things that I wouldn't have been able to see before. Maps, depictions of a country, maps to understanding, the causal relationships in physics, how change happens in the natural world or how change happens in the urban world. And it's led me to think in systems, which I think is helpful and important in some respects, but requires a level of abstraction, which then we usually try to counteract with more detail, trying to look closer at something. But there's always something that exists outside of the frame or in further detail. So basically, perspective through a lens leads to preconception, which leads to a gap between me and the world when I experience it. So oftentimes I feel this instead of this. I feel a rendering of experience instead of experience itself, which is just a general overarching alienation from the world. Which my previous experience with alienation was with, happened to do with my body, which I had to counteract with biofeedback therapy. Basically, you have these sensors on your body which then present your internal signals of your body onto a screen, which allows you to understand the causal relationships between stimuli in your body, which then allow you to, by seeing them, allow you to learn how to control them. And it works similarly to I think of it similarly to mirror therapy, where the perceived state of a body can create that state in the body. Usually your own body through your own perception. So what I'm following here is a general line of thought is this focus on disembodiment and alienation. And I'm trying to think about it in relation to lenses, control, and societal change. So what are the limits of structured biological and perceptual control, which is kind of my initial focus in the line of thought that I'm following. So I started with Maurice Merleau-Ponty with the phenomenology of perception. Being a phenomenologist, maybe I should give a brief understanding of what phenomenology is. The slogan or the catchphrase is to return to things themselves. So instead of considering the world and trying to gain understanding through, as Maurice Merleau-Ponty tries to focus on this through empiricism or intellectualism, he thinks that we should try and return back to the world itself as we experience it through the body. To return to things themselves is to return to that world which precedes knowledge, of which knowledge always speaks, and in relation to which every scientific schematization is an abstract and derivative sign language, as is geography in relation to the countryside, in which we have learnt beforehand what a forest or a prairie or a river is. So in this example he gives, he's saying that this understanding of the world that you might learn through geography doesn't come anywhere near this experiential understanding of the world, because learning it in this geographical lens, or using that as a lens, it's a derivative understanding, or it's through this derivative sign language, as he says. And although he does think that an empirical understanding of the world, or an intellectual understanding of the world, does dilute experience, he also does give it some sort of validity, especially when he considers society and history. We must seek an understanding from all these angles simultaneously. Everything has meaning, as we shall find, and we shall find this same structure underlying all relationships. All these views are true, provided they are not isolated. That we delve deeply into history and reach the unique core of existential meaning which emerges in each perspective. It is true, as Marx says, that history does not walk on its head, but it's also true that it does not think with its feet. Or one should say, rather, that it is neither its head nor its feet that we have to worry about, but its body. So, using this general starting point from Merleau-Ponty, I decided to try and take different angles to look at the social body through the lenses that I've gathered at Pratt. Starting with Stuart Hall, I think of media as a sort of something that starts to take precedent over our biological perceptual field and starts to mediate the way that we experience the world. I think that's one of the primary things that I've been thinking about in my approach to this. But although it does sort of mediate experience through teaching us understanding about the world and culture, as Stuart Hall says, meaning in media is not actually fully dictated by the encode of our message. We take part in creating meaning through the act of decoding. So this marks one of those limits of control. In thinking about how that system works, where we can gain meaning through media and messaging, it's made me think about this structure, which then brought me to Michel Foucault with this structural understanding of society and organization of power. The management of life and body becomes one of the essential functions of the state and of political power. So what I took out of this is his focus on the reorganization of power in society away from sovereign power into biopower and biopolitics, which enacts on us through population tracking and through institutions that condition us to be more productive, create less friction. And one of these side effects that I started to relate to the project that I'm working on is this side effect of those institutions and population tracking that leads to an overarching disembodiment, and that's one of those conditions that it gives us and conditions us towards, which then also does make us less frictional and more productive and easier to extract power from. But thinking about this structure that Foucault brings up. I don't know where I am on my slides. I'm just going to go. Margaret Archer talks about how structure can change. And she talks about how structuration theory, the structure is a setting for change to take place. So structuration tries to frame agency and structure as though they're somewhat parallel and in relation to each other almost perfectly. But Margaret Archer tries to propose that agency exists within structure, somewhat causally attached, but more so independently, so that agency changes structure. So morphogenesis is also a process, referring to the complex interchanges that produce change in a system's given form, structure, or state. So basically, the structure that we're talking about in Foucault is subject to change through agency, so another limit to control. The next person I brought in was Brian Masumi, the autonomy of affect. Intensity is embodied in purely autonomic reactions, most directly manifested in the skin, as the surface of the body at its interface with things. Depth reactions belong more to the form, content, qualification level, even though they resolve autonomic functions such as heartbeat and breathing. So he's identifying this affect that comes pre-emotion. So emotion is actually affect that's shaped by our social understanding and shaped by our context of the world to create emotions. But he thinks that this affect is somewhat autonomous from the emotional understanding of it. So this also leads to, an obvious sort of limit to control because of the autonomy of affect. Renderings and depictions, perspectives of the world give context to our bodily experience of the world by standing between us and the world itself. But these renderings and the gap that it leaves between the two. Our own alienation and disembodiment contains that gap where phenomena exist on their own, outside of perceptions of the world, waiting for us to experience them, and reshape our understanding of the world into something that is shaped by those experiences on their own, and the nature of our interactions with them. So to synthesize this is my light bulb moment. It's a light bulb that's projected through a pinhole camera. I came up with an exhibition design that would actually just be a room-sized pinhole camera that would be installed in New York so that the outside world is projected into the room, so as though the world is outside of the room and you can see it on the walls. I wrote something for this because I feel like I need to hit it home. It's an indescribable experience. The fixed perspective, upside down light, purely a phenomenon of physics. You become separate from the world as though the world is outside the room, just beyond the walls. All the light in the room comes from a single fixed perspective in space, a pea-sized hole in the wall. The room starts to feel like you could fit in a speck on the wall outside, which you get to look through as though you've broken physics or literally become a fixed perspective in space. As time moves around that spot, you stay there. It's not like looking through eyes or becoming an inanimate object. It's literally seeing the light from a fixed location in space, the size of a pea, that happens to be a hole in the wall outside. Every beam of light reflecting off the cars, people walking by, clouds, sidewalks, reflect towards that spot on the wall that happens to be a hole, which allows the light to enter the room onto the walls. The sky is on the floor, the sidewalk's on the ceiling, the store across the street is upside down on the wall. These spots on the wall outside exist endlessly, and the world projects onto them constantly, almost like the way that the world projects onto our bodies. We're in full contact with it at all times. By entering this fold in space, we're reminded of the world's presence in our experience with it, in our existence with it. No lens, no science or intellect can explain it better than the world itself. In our experience of it through the body, seeing the world like this brings us back to it, back into our bodies, like a type of feedback through experience with the world, which you might say is a phenomenal feedback. That's all I got.
Anybody who has questions? Let me ask this one question. Hey, Garrison, that was really, really great and brought me back to a lot of conversations I had also, as I was getting started as a social theorist about this dialectic between structure and agency. My very quick question for you is one of my favorite philosophical examples from Merleau-Ponty is he talks about the game of soccer. Talks about, it's not the field, it's not the players, it's the result of the intentional action that brings them all together, and that creates something always new, but also engaged with the world and the space, and it's performed through the body. So I was wondering if play or sports are going to be something that you might explore, or games that generate something new every time they're played.
Yeah.
As you think about how we move beyond the limits of structure and bring agency phenomenally into our understanding of the world.
Yeah, I think that reminds me of back to Archer, because she's saying that structure is like the scene for things to take place, almost like the way that a set on a movie is, where even though the lines are read, like similar to the rules of a game, the agency within those scenes can make a change on that scene or the set. So yeah, that would be really cool to bring in. We don't have time for that many questions, but maybe one more.
Inspiring. Good luck. Sounds great. All these theories that you laid out at the beginning, they're not only about the relationship between structure and agency, but they're also about change that comes as a result. And I was wondering if you are planning or seeing in your, I mean, I know this is an unfinished work, but do we observe a change with that reflection, or what is the change that you are thinking of capturing? Is there a change, or is it just looking at a situation where the structure and agency interact?
I think that what I notice is the fundamentals of biofeedback and the way that it instills change in the body is kind of that fundamental change that I'm trying to instill in the social body. So that's sort of counteracting this disembodiment and alienation that I feel collectively. So that's kind of the change that I was hoping to chase. But yeah.